Take a look around you. The coins in your pocket, the sink in your kitchen, maybe even the strings on an electric guitar. You are almost certainly looking at nickel. It's a metal that's so common, so everyday, that we barely even notice it. But trust me, behind that familiar silvery gleam is an incredible story. It's a story that stretches from medieval myths and exploding stars all the way to the future of our green economy. So let's peel back that shine and discover the surprising story of this unassuming hero.
See, before we knew it as element number 28 on the periodic table, nickel had a much more sinister reputation. And to understand why, we've got to go back in time to an age of folklore and a whole lot of frustration.
Our story kicks off not in some high-tech lab, but deep inside the mines of medieval Germany. This is where miners were convinced they were being tricked by a very mysterious kind of ore.
So where did nickel even get its name? Well, it actually comes from a place of pure frustration. You see, miners back in the day would find this rock that looked exactly like valuable copper ore, but no matter what they did, no matter how they smelted it, they couldn't get a single drop of copper out. They were so exasperated they blamed it on a mischievous mountain goblin, a spirit they called nickel. So the ore itself became known as Kupfernickel, which literally means nickel's copper, or, as you see here, the devil's copper.
And this timeline just perfectly captures its incredible journey. For centuries, it was nothing more than a curse, a nuisance. Then, bam, 1751. A Swedish chemist named Axel Kronstedt finally manages to isolate a totally new element from this cursed ore. And in a bit of an ironic twist, he named it nickel after the very same goblin it was blamed on. From there, well, it went on to become one of the most important metals in our entire modern world.
Okay, so we've gone from myth to chemistry. But nickel's true origin story is way more epic. It takes us from deep inside the Earth all the way to the heart of dying stars.
It's a really fascinating question, right? I mean, we find nickel all around us, but it wasn't actually formed here on Earth. Its origins are, well, they're cosmic.
And the answer is just absolutely spectacular. Nickel is one of the major end products of what's called supernova nucleosynthesis. In plain English, it's created in the final fiery moments of massive stars as they collapse and then explode, scattering all these newly made elements across the entire cosmos.
So after being forged in that stellar explosion, this cosmic dust eventually clumped together, forming things like iron-nickel meteorites. These meteorites then bombarded the early Earth. And because nickel is so dense, most of it sank deep, deep down, which is why we think Earth's core is primarily a mixture of iron and nickel.
And this right here, this reveals nickel's hidden superpower. We often hear that iron is the most stable element, that it's the end of the line for fusion inside stars. But that's actually a common misconception. The real champion, the most stable nucleus in the entire universe, atom for atom, is a specific isotope, nickel-62. It has the highest binding energy per nucleon, making it the true king of stability.
Okay, so it's forged in a star and it's super stable. But how do we get from that to it being, the quiet workhorse of our industrial world?
I mean, this chart tells the whole story. A whopping 68%, over 2/3 of all nickel produced goes into making stainless steel. Its amazing ability to fight off corrosion and add strength is exactly what makes our buildings, our bridges, and our kitchen sinks so tough and durable.
But it's not just about steel. Nickel pops up in some really unexpected places. It's used as a catalyst, something called Raney nickel, to turn liquid vegetable oils solid for things like margarine. It's what gives electric guitar strings that bright, clear sound. And that shiny, tough finish on your bathroom faucet? Yep, that's often nickel plating doing its job.
So how do we get nickel that pure for all these high-tech uses? Well, there's this fascinating bit of chemistry called the Mond process. It's like a magic trick. You take impure nickel, you gently warm it with carbon monoxide, and it turns just the nickel into a gas, leaving all the solid impurities behind. Then you just heat that gas up, and it breaks down, depositing nickel that's over 99.99% pure. It is an incredibly clever process.
All right, we've looked at the industrial past. Now, let's turn to nickel's absolutely critical role in powering our future. This is where nickel becomes one of the most important elements of the 21st century, no exaggeration. It is a key, essential ingredient in the cathodes of the lithium-ion batteries that power electric vehicles. As a general rule, the more nickel you have in a battery, the more energy you can pack into it, and that translates directly to a longer driving range. Now, all this crazy demand has huge geopolitical implications because the world's supply is highly concentrated. Just look at this. Indonesia is, by an enormous margin, the world's nickel superpower.
They produce many times more than the next closest countries. This kind of concentration has massive implications for the global economy.
And this just shows you how wild the market can get. In March of 2022, you had this perfect storm of geopolitical concerns and skyrocketing demand from the EV industry, and it caused the price of nickel to briefly hit an absolutely astonishing $100,000 per ton. It was a moment that showed the world just how vital and, how volatile this metal has become.
We've seen nickel on a cosmic scale, on a global scale. But for this last section, let's bring it right back home, to a much more personal level. Let's talk about the way we actually interact with it, every single day.
Here's a fun bit of irony for you. The American 5-cent coin, the nickel, is actually only about 25% nickel. The rest is copper. But because the price of both of those metals has soared, there have been times when the value of the metal in the coin was actually worth more than its 5-cent ace value.
For all its amazing uses, our relationship with nickel isn't always a positive one. I mean, what's the downside of having this metal in so many things that are constantly touching our skin?
It turns out nickel is the world's #1 cause of contact dermatitis, or a contact allergy. For a huge part of the population, direct contact with things like cheap jewelry, the button on your jeans, or even coins can trigger a really uncomfortable allergic reaction. So the very same element that helps build our modern world can also be a very personal and very itchy irritant. So in the end, nickel is just so much more than a simple metal, isn't it? It's a piece of an exploded star, it's the source of a medieval myth, it's the engine of our green transition, and it's a common allergy. It really makes you wonder, what other materials that we touch every single day are hiding a story that's just as amazing?